Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Man is always talking about freedom and how to become free. In order to understand what needs to be done to become free, we have to understand what it is that stops us from being free. What is it that holds us back from freedom? What gets in our way from our ability to be ourselves? An eagle one time landed next to a chicken coop and laid its egg, and the farmer had made a fence around the area near the chicken coop so the chickens could go out of the coop and walk outside and not run away. When the egg hatched, the eagle left, and the little eagle, the eaglet, was left with chickens, was raised with chickens, and all he knew was chickens. And he was fed and he was comfortable, and the chickens were nice companions. And later on, when an eagle flew by and saw the little eagle, the eagle said to it, "Come, you're not one of them, you're one of us." And the eagle said, "No, I'm a chicken. I do what chickens do, and chickens can't fly, so I'm stuck here." And later on, the bird left. Later on, another eagle came by and saw the little eaglet and said, "Come, fly." And all the chickens heard this, and they looked at him and said, "You can't fly. You're a chicken." This went on for a while, and as the eagle grew, one time it began to flap its wings, and all of a sudden it took off, and the chickens are looking at it and can't understand what's going on, and then it was over the fence and out, and it was gone. It had escaped from its surroundings. It had escaped from its jail. All of us have been taught to be a certain way. And all of us, from the time we were little, believed what we were taught. Our first teachers were our mother and father. And since they took care of us, and since they provided everything for us, we believed what they told us. As we grew up, we went to teachers, and we believed what they told us. And we became trapped in the belief system that they were trapped in. And this is really critical to understanding the nature of why it's difficult to become free. We are taught by people who aren't free. We are taught by people who are trapped in their circumstances, and they teach us these circumstances which trap them as if they were reality and as if we had to live within that. Then they go even further. They add consequences to violating the belief system. In other words, if you don't do what we tell you to do, something terrible is going to happen to you. So it is very, very important that you do what you're told in the way that you're told. This is a word, there's a word that describes this in English, and the word is culture. Each of us comes from a different culture. If we live in Turkey, we have a Turkish culture. If we live in Pakistan, we have a Pakistani culture. If we live in America, we have various American cultures. As a matter of fact, you can find places in America where people have been here for generations, have brought the culture from where they came from with them, and within those neighborhoods, they still speak the language of the old country and they still follow the culture of the old country. Nothing has changed. Culture is a very, very powerful element in our lives and in our upbringing. And if we are going to escape and find freedom, we have to leave our culture. The eagle had to leave the chickens. He wasn't a chicken. We are attempting to become insan kamil, not ordinary man. We're trying to become true humans, true human beings. And to do this, a massive change has to occur. Within each culture, within each religion, within each way of life that goes on in this world, the elders are usually telling us this is the true path. This is the true way. There is no other way. And everyone that is different than us is somehow an enemy to us, or trying to pull us from our way, or will somehow endanger us in our path. In truth, unless we begin to understand the unity in all of existence that runs through every culture, that runs through every religion, that runs through every race, unless we get to that point of understanding the unity in all of existence, we will continue to be bound by the dictates of our culture and by the dictates of the ones who came before us, who are trapped in that culture. It's difficult to understand that because we have these really, really strong feelings for our culture and these really, really strong feelings for the people who raised us and the language we were raised in and the customs we were brought up around. So to break free becomes really difficult because we have assumed that that's who we are. Bawa called this blood ties. Our blood connection to the people who raised us, to the culture that raised us, and to the culture that we were brought up in. And somehow we have to transcend, float above, fly away from our culture. We have to become free of all of the chains that our culture tries to hold us in place in order for us to enter into freedom. in order for us to become free of what holds us in place and what doesn't allow us to go further. When you are stuck within a culture, your vision is limited to that culture's vision. Your vision is limited to the rules of that culture. Your vision is limited to the ways of that culture. And you can't go beyond it because you begin to feel that you are somehow being disloyal to your blood. You're being disloyal to your ancestors. You're being disloyal to the ones who raised you and the ones you grew up with. So let's ask a relevant and simple question. Is your allegiance to your ancestors and to your culture, or is your allegiance to God? Who is your allegiance to? Now, what the culture will tell you is that your allegiance to God is through your culture and through the way your culture believes. And if you try and believe in a different way or understand things in a different way, you have violated your relationship with Allah. You have violated your relationship with God, because we, your culture, are the ones who interpret this relationship and how you can be involved in this relationship. And if you don't listen to us, you've gone astray. Well, look at all the great teachers and what happened to them. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was born into the culture of Mecca. And what did they try to do to him? They said, "You're not following our way." And eventually he had to escape. They tried to kill him. Moses was raised in the court of Pharaoh. And eventually, what did he have to do? He came to be the enemy of Pharaoh, because in order to escape and become free, he had to escape the culture that the Pharaoh was trying to have him live in. Look at Jesus's life. What happened to Jesus? He came into a culture and said, "This culture has lost its way, and I have brought a new way." And what was the reaction? They tried to kill him. Saint Francis in the Catholic Church was pushed away by the Pope because his ideas were too radical for the church. There is a book, I think it's called, well, I'm not going to go into the book, but the point is that Jesus came to the Vatican and met with the Pope, and the Pope essentially told him, "We don't need you now. We have it under control. We know the way to do this, and we don't need any help." And it's like that. Now, if the leaders of the religions had to leave the culture in order to break out, how are we any different? Don't we have to go through the same thing that they went through? Buddha was born into a royal family. He was a prince. Yet what happened with Buddha? He let go of all of his titles. He let go of all of his wealth, picked up a begging bowl and a robe, and lived in the woods. He left his culture. He left his birth, his earthly birthright, and entered into his birthright into reality. So each of us has two inheritances, two birthrights. One is from the world, and one is from our Creator. And we have to choose which one we are interested in, which one we want to pursue, which one we look to as our salvation. Is our salvation in the culture of our earthly life, or is our salvation in freedom from this earthly life to find eternal life with our Lord? This choice has to be made by each of us. We can stay within the comfort and the confines of the way our culture defines religion. We can stay within the warmth and the security of what the elders tell us. And what they tell us is, do what we say and everything will be fine. Or we can take that next step and try and find out what is the truth that the prophets told us. What is the truth that the wise men told us? What is the truth about the ones who left the world and sought their home with God? And there's a difference between the two. And to find your truth with God, as opposed to finding your truth in the world, means that we need to become different. We need to be different than the ones who brought us up. We need to be different than the people we associate with on a regular basis. We need to make our home with the ones who have abandoned the world for reality, who have abandoned illusion for the truth, who have abandoned worldly justice for Allah's justice. And we have to make this stand. And the first thing that we need to learn, the first thing that we need to be able to give up, is the great lie within this existence. And that great lie is, I exist. I can do things. I can control things. I can move forward. I fall backwards. I am in charge. That is the lie that all culture is based on. All culture is based on the separation of I and you. I am somehow different than you, or our culture is somehow different than everybody else's culture. Our way is different than everybody else's way. We are not part of anybody else. We are separate in this world, and we have been chosen by Allah to walk the true path with our leaders who take us in the correct fashion. The holy ones have all said similar things. They've all said, to find the truth, you have to leave the world. The Israelites had to leave Egypt and wander in the desert. The Meccans that followed Muhammad had to make pilgrimage from Mecca to Medina to escape the persecution in that part of the world. The ones who followed Jesus had to leave their religion and enter into a new pact with Jesus. None of this is not known. Everybody knows these stories. They're not hidden from anybody. Yet, people can't see what's plainly shown before their faces because each culture tries to emphasize their own importance and their own superiority, and then begins to interpret all of these tales, which are evident on their face, into new and different ways which keep you trapped within the culture. And the reason all begins with the belief that I exist, that I am somehow different, that my race is somehow different, that my race is somehow more important, that the country of my origin is somehow more important, than my religion is somehow more important, than what I understand is more important than what everybody else understands. It's all based on differences. This entire world is based on differences. All of the understandings of every culture are based on differences. All of the religious interpretations among those who haven't reached the level of transcendence is based on differences. We need to get over differences. We need to be able to let everyone live without we making judgment as to their lifestyle, as to their religion, and as to their belief system. There's lots of stories of men praying to idols and people intervening, trying to get them to believe in the one true formless God. And usually Allah comes into the midst of the story and says, their faith is strong. And even though their faith is with an idol at this moment, it will transcend and it will grow, but don't break that faith. And we, when we're in a culture, are very ready to break anyone's faith who doesn't believe the same way that we believe. We're very ready to judge and tell them they don't know what they're talking about because we've been explained and we understand and we believe that there's only one way and we know that way, and we'll be happy to tell you. Ali went through certain things that we should do in our lives in a set of standards. One of the things he said was, don't coerce anybody. And he meant that in a large, large slew of ways. Don't coerce anybody to try and make them do anything on your behalf. Don't coerce them to try and make them believe in religion in a certain way. Don't coerce people. In other words, don't use force. The Quran says there is no coercion in religion. Yet, the ones who interpret the Quran are very happy to coerce people every moment that they get, and they're very happy to use the sword to try and bring people into the religion. Yet it is clearly set forth within the Quran that this is not the way you bring people into religion. The ones who come to the truth by ones who have transcended and who have reached the state of love and kindness, wherein they can give that love and kindness to the ones they interact with and give to them those qualities so that they themselves can take those qualities into themselves and be elevated to that place of understanding that is beyond religion. In Sufism, you have Shariat, Tariqat, Hakikat, Marifat, and then you have the place that is beyond all earthly understandings, and that's Sufiyat, where you go beyond the religions, beyond form. And this is a very important concept, to be able to go beyond form. As long as you are tied to form, you are tied to the illusory world. As long as you believe that form is the methodology for transcendence, you are tied to the illusory world. Our Creator is without form. His qualities are without form. We need to reach a space that is beyond form. Yet, there are all these religious leaders that will tell you, you can't understand anything unless your beard is a certain length. You can't understand anything unless your jibbah is a certain length. You can't understand anything unless you cut your hair a certain way. You can't understand anything unless your turban looks a certain way. Everything has to do with form. Understand that until we enter into the formless, we are within the world of illusion. Understand that as long as we abide and give obeisance to form and make distinctions between our form and everybody else's form, we are tied to the world of illusion. We're trapped within the jail of form. We're trapped within the ideas that culture has developed over the years. And we are maintaining and sustaining this imprisonment of our own will because we refuse to move away from it. Until the eagle spread its wing, it was a chicken. It thought it was a chicken, and it was going to remain a chicken. There's a wonderful story about Shems of Tabrizi. He was the teacher of Rumi, and he was a wild child. And one time he was with his father, and they're walking along the banks of a lake that had a levee built on it. And there was a small area on top of the levee to walk. And Shems is walking, and his father is frightened that he's going to fall into the water. And Shems, at the age of about 6 or 7, says to his father, "Don't worry, I'm not a chicken, I'm a duck." And he was making his father understand that he wasn't like everybody else. He was something different. Each of us are not like everybody else. We're something different. And what we've been looking for all our lives is to find somebody different who within we could recognize our differences, from we could recognize that somehow something's been missing from everything we've been taught. Somehow we know we've been lied to, but we have never had an alternative approach. We've never had another way of looking at things. And then all of a sudden, out of the midst of this world comes another approach, comes another way of seeing things, comes a new way of understanding, comes a liberation that you can feel and you can sense. And somehow, when this happens for you, you have to hold on to it. And you can't go back to the way you were. Because if you go back, you'll be trapped again. There's a story about a disciple who had a friend, and he was always trying to get his friend to go to see his sheikh. And his friend always said, I have 20,000 questions that I want to ask him. But he never went. And finally, he got him to go. And he went and he brought him before the sheikh. And all of a sudden, when he got before the sheikh, he was quiet. He didn't say a word. He just sat there in the stillness, being overwhelmed by the presence. When they left, within minutes of leaving, he said, I had all these questions, but something happened to me. Now, what happened to that man was the questions had a priority in his life over his ability to feel that something new had happened to him that he didn't have a question for, that he didn't understand, and that he couldn't understand. So he wanted to go back to his questions because at least he could understand something with these questions. But this new feeling that he felt, he couldn't understand, so he ran from it. In line with that story, there's another one about this lady who meets a sheikh, and every year he comes into town, and every year she asks him the same question, and every year he gives her the same answer. And this just goes on and on and on. And somebody who's watching this asked him, what's going on with her? And he said, well, for her, her questions are more important than the answers. She holds on to her questions. They're her reality. They're her life. She doesn't want an answer. If she wanted an answer, she would have to begin to change. And she doesn't want to change. What is it that we want to do? What is it that our, excuse me, what our intention is? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? What is the way that we want to go? Are we happy with the lifestyle that we're living? And do we want to stay in that same place, do all of those same things and not change anything since the time of our ancestors? Or are we ready to take a next step in our own evolution, which means, are we ready to take a step towards the truth? In Islam, right now, there are those who say we have to go back to the time of the Prophet, and we have to do the things the time that they did at the time of the Prophet. So what is it that they do? They grow their beard in a certain way, and they wear their clothes in a certain way, and they try to do the customs that went on during that time. But ask yourself, what was the most important thing about the time of the Prophet? The Prophet. So how are you going to go back to the time of the Prophet without the Prophet? How can you create the time of the Prophet without the Prophet in your midst? It's a foolishness. It's a foolishness that comes from the mind and that says we as individuals can create reality. Reality exists. We don't create it. We either find it or we are lost outside of it. And we have to understand this and come to that conclusion. And we have to look for somebody who can tell us the truth. And how do we know when we're being told the truth? The questions stop. All of a sudden, we're in stillness. All of a sudden, we're at peace. And all of a sudden, all of the anxieties and all of the difficulties that we had before seem to wash away, at least for the moment that we're in the presence of the truth. Now, when we leave that presence, can we sustain that truth? Can we continue to see the truth when we're by ourselves? And that's when we have to begin to realize that when we're by ourselves, he is still with us. He was with us when we were with the truth, and he's with us when our mind clouds over the truth. So if we can get by that cloud, if we can get by that, we'll be there again, because it's always available, whether in the presence of the Sheikh or outside of the presence of the Sheikh. It doesn't leave. Allah is always here. Allah is always with us. Allah is always ready to show us reality and show us the truth. And all of the angels and all of the prophets and all of the Kutubs are involved in this venture to show us the truth. So we need to make ourselves available to it. We need to stop believing in our old ways. Stop holding on to the crutches of the world. Stop thinking that the world can support us and the world can maintain us. The truth is only in one place, and that's with God. And we have to learn the truth of that path. May that path of truth be the path for each of us. Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.